Hello, and welcome to the lore of Braunhaven. Today we're going to be talking about and answering some questions about the cult of the drowned child. And I guess the biggest question is who or what is the drowned child? In the short of it, the drowned child is a demigod, but it is not the same type of demigod that is talked about in the Braunhaven campaign setting book. That in that book, it is determined there is a 1 in 6 chance for characters to become either a demigod or an avatar. Demigod being the union between a god and a mortal child. In this case, of being a demigod, the drowned child is actually the conjoining of an old god and a force of pure chaos. So before the written testimonies of the world, so this would be pre negative 2000, and of course long before uh, the uh, the celestial palace crashed into the prime plane. The old gods were first coming into existence, and of course that started with Montes, uh, who really can be said to have created the prime plane. And the next creation that Montes made to assist him in ruling this new plane was Thuros, the god of fire. Montes being the god of elemental earth. Um, he then created Satis, and Satis was the the goddess of elemental water, the great wave mother, the kraken in the deep. And Satis got to witness the birth of her sister, Frisia. Frisia is the goddess of elemental air. And uh, this immediately made Satis jealous. Not because she was jealous that she had a sister or that she coveted elemental air. It made her jealous because Montes was going around creating all of these other gods. To be exact, there were originally four, the elements, and he used Thuros moving across his hand to create Frisia through the convection, and this this bothered Satis. She wanted to create an offspring that would be able to rule by her side. She wanted to create an offspring that would be her right hand in the ruling of elemental water and to rule with her in the depths of the seas. This was not something that Montes was going to allow. He decided that no, you, my offspring are not going to create other gods. If you want to create mortals and tend after them to worship you, that is of course within your purview. And this was allowed in several cases. In the example of Sinaz, he created the elves. Tula created humans and halflings. But this wasn't enough for Satis. And Thuros kind of made fun of her for it, and she got pissed off, and um, she fled. In her anger and fury, she flooded the prime plane with her tears, and she left. And she went out and floated through the astral realm for who knows how long. The time on the planes flows differently, so it is impossible to really state how long she was out there. It is also impossible to state, the veracity of any of this, considering that this was prehistory and tales told by mouth, essentially a game of telephone, going down the line to see, how far has that story changed once it gets to the end result. Uh, who knows? It's a good question. But Floating through the astral plane, she went so far as that she could no longer see the prime plane in the distance through the pink and the purple wisps that make up the astral. And she, looking ahead of her, she saw that she had come upon a new bubble. That she was not aware that there were any other prime planes. She wasn't aware that there was anything else floating in the astral plane. She, of course, had run into the the petrified bodies of dead gods and other immortals. This is usually where they end up. But she wasn't aware of any other planes, and in fact, she had found one. And so, through her anger and grief, she kind of this changed her mood. She got curious, and so she entered this plane. The plane that she had entered is known as the Unknown Realm, and it is a plane of pure chaos, not evil, simply for evil's sake, or even evil with machinations. No, it is pure chaos. It is what will, to a mortal mind, bring pure madness. And uh, really, to a god's mind, it has a similar effect. And she was altered simply by being there. But while exploring this plane, she came across an entity that is simply referred to as him or he, and she was enamored with this entity of pure chaos. And before she knew it, she apparently had blacked out, and she awoke to be floating once more in the astral plane. And she would have thought that this encounter with this being was a mere dream, except for the fact that she was pregnant. And so she made her way back to the prime plane, and she knew that she had to keep this pregnancy secret because this would anger Montes and Thuris. And so when she got to the prime plane, she dove deep under the sea, and she secreted herself away in an undersea cave where she gave birth to what can be only described as an abomination. It had the head of a kraken and the body of a dark god, and it quickly grew. Um, it grew very quickly, and it was a being of pure chaos and evil. It didn't make matters any better that she attempted to raise the child using her own parenting technique, which wasn't really a good technique. Her lessons were that of cruelty, and this only enforced the creature's nature, and uh, it mimicked that in its behavior. It saw that Tula had created the halflings and elves, and that Sinaz had created the elves, and it particularly had a thing for Sinaz's elves because one of the elves that Sinaz had created were the sea elves, and uh, this, of course, kind of went against the creature's mother, seeing as how she was the goddess of elemental water. And so the creature set out and decided to make a statement by killing off the sea elves to the point where the coastline of along the Dragon Sea, the western coastline of the continent, was nothing but bloody sea foam. And it didn't kill off all of the sea elves, but it greatly diminished their population. And that wasn't enough for it, so it then moved inland from the coast, and it destroyed several halfling shires and human towns, and just left a bloody swath inland before it finally returned back to the sea. Having discovered this, um, Sadis realized the extent of her child's ire, and knew that Montes and Thuros were going to be exceptionally pissed off about this. So during this time, uh, before uh, Sadis could do anything concerning her child, Frisia decided to go and check on her sister, and she did. She went to the bottom of the sea, and this was when it was first discovered that the chaos that had infected Sadis when she had entered the unknown realm could quickly spread. And this chaos spread to Frisia. And so suddenly, the goddess of elemental air became somewhat unstable to the point that nobody could really determine what she was going to do from one minute to the next. And uh, once but she was still with it enough that discovering what the child had done, Frisia immediately went back to Montes and Thuris to explain to them, um, the danger that the child represented, not just to mortals, but the child clearly now represented danger also to the gods. And the chaos that had infected Frisia now infected Thuros. Montes sequestered himself away deep in the prime plane under the mountains, and it is proposed that these mountains were actually deep under the Skelos Mountains, and so he protected himself from the chaos, or at least he thought he had. The the child uh, didn't understand what it had done wrong, or perhaps it didn't care, because remember, it is a being of pure chaos and evil, and it was covered head to toe in the viscera of elves, halflings, and humans. And so Sadis basically tricked it into getting into a pool of water, where she told the child she was going to bathe it. She then uh, wrapped her hands around its neck, strangling it, and pushed it deep to the bottom of the pool and waited until the child stopped moving. Hence the name, the drowned child. She then went to the other old gods, Montes, Thuris, Frisia, and capitulated herself before them, basically asking for forgiveness for what she had done. And now she understood Montes's decree as to why she couldn't go out and create another god. And uh, Thuros immediately wanted Montes to give elemental water to be split between him and Frisia. And instead, Montes took her apology and told Thuros that no, elemental water needs to be uh, under a single domain. It cannot be ruled um, by you and your sister. It has to be ruled by its own, and thus it will stay with Sadis. But and things calmed down at that point. There it is said that there were many years of relative calm in the known world, but the drowned child wasn't completely dead. No god really ever is completely dead, and gods, the old gods especially, once the council of 12 elder gods came, it became a completely an aware fact to them that the worship of mortals gave them life and power. And word of mouth stories, as the prehistories go, had remained in the known world, and some of these people, instead of worshiping either the Council of the 12 Gods or the old gods, decided to kind of morph the story of the drowned child into the fact that if you worship the drowned child, it can be a quick route to power, or to longevity or whatever it is that these people decide to worship when it's a rather crazy idea. And so this this veneration funneled itself as life force back into the drowned child, and he started to stir at the bottom of his pool, and he came forth. And the first thing that he did was he decided that he was going to be a little bit more subtle about things, and his end goal is to kill off all of the gods, both old and new, and take control for himself. He's not quite as subtle as Vuslux, um, but it can also be debated on, you know, uh, the amount of power that he has, the sheer capability that he has is greater than that of an archdevil. And so the first thing that he did is the few sea elves that were left, he corrupted them. And there are no longer any sea elves in the known world. They have vanished. They are no longer with us. All of the sea elves were corrupted and turned into Sauhagen, also known as sea devils. And the Sauhagen, in their veneration the of the drowned child, were set on the path of raiding coastal towns and cities and just causing as much mischief and mayhem as they can. Usually they attack at night. Not always, but usually. When the townspeople least expected, or at least the least prepared for such an attack. But the Sauhagen weren't really good enough for him. In their transformation, he had made some, I guess, mistakes. They didn't have they no longer had the intelligence that the sea elves would have had, and so he went to create a following 2.0, and that came in the form in Orentis of the Gentil. For full information on the Gentil, you should definitely check out um, uh, Tome of Essential Horrors. You can find that on Drive Through RPG, I believe, and highly recommended book. If you like having tons of options for monsters, definitely check that book out. But the Gentil, he decided to create something a bit more subtle, and so he created the Gentil, and they take multiple forms. So the first initial form is that of the Gentil commoner. They appear as normal humans or elves or whatever, but there are usually some telltale sign. They may have some fish scales on them, on at some place on their body, such as a small patch on an arm, or they might have bulging eyes, or their hair is always wet for some reason. But for the most part, they can pass themselves off as humans, and that's what they did. They were insidious, and they crept into human civilizations with little difficulty because they looked mostly like everybody else, and as long as they kept a low profile, nobody looked too closely upon them. The other thing that he created were the Gentil ocean hunters. Now, these are basically, or were, dogs and wolves, creatures of that nature, sometimes other creatures. But they are morphed into the Gentil ocean hunters that can be released like a pack of hounds. And the way that this conversion process takes place is that once the initial commoners would infiltrate the towns, they would then set up some hidden shrine, and they would begin their veneration of the dark god, the drowned child. And part of that veneration would be sacrifice. Usually, the sacrifice of humans or demi-humans, or in the case of ocean hunters, dogs and wolves are quite common. And this the sacrifice would create new commoners. Now, as the cult grew, um, a lot of times towns would then, especially on the winter and summer solstice, they would sacrifice uh, their adolescent, some of their adolescent children, uh, to the drowned child. And uh, teenage girls were really venerated because teenage girls had the ability to become a Gentil ascendant, which is a high priestess, um, and the Gentil ascendant usually is the head of the cult, or whatever cell there is that is operating, and she will have the ability to create more. And so the boys and many of the girls, of course, were turned into commoners, but the boys most frequently, especially the strapping young lads, were turned into Gentil Godspawned. And the Godspawned have some, they take on the form that they have some of the traits of the demigod, of the drowned child. They are created more or less in his image, and and so all of them, once there is an ascendant in place, all of them can be upgraded, basically requiring yet another sacrifice. So a commoner can then be sacrificed to become a god spawn, and a god spawn can be sacrificed to become an ascendant. The ocean hunters are never. Once they're an ocean hunter, they're an ocean hunter. They are what they are, cannon fodder. And so this spread from Orentis and has now come to Exandria, or Zandamar. Sorry, wrong game. And they have subtly infiltrated. They have subtly infiltrated Erebachia, and Erebachia has been dealing with it for a while. But the Glaucian Empire is just now, for the first time, really dealing with this, and they have been making their way into the Imperial Port. What most people don't know is they actually already have a base of operations. They have made their way in and taken over Reef's End. The village of Reef's End is the birthplace of Maximilian Tacidantilus, the Archmage. And so next time we will talk about Reef's End and all of its quirkiness. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.